X-Men style Fox logo. The little X there.
Mutation. It is the key to our evolution.
Patrick Stewart and his smooth as honey voice are always a win. One of the smartest things they did for X-Men was grounding us firmly in our reality. Gotham and Metropolis, while based on real cities, aren't real. Blade had LA, but there was something otherworldly about all of them. This is our past. We're staring one of our worst atrocities in the face. A blight on the human race to tie the X-Men into our world. Combine that with Xavier's intro about evolution, and so far nothing is even out of the ordinary. Obviously the idea is to present Eric's magnetism powers. But equally as important is his strength with those abilities. It's not just that he can move metal, that power is stronger than 4 full-grown men in a metal gate. Typical teenage coming-of-age story, a first kiss, contrasted with Rogue's actual coming-of-age story, already shining a light on how formative years aren't the same for everyone.
These mutations manifest at puberty and are often triggered by periods of heightened emotional stress.
Also, let's just consider that we only get Magneto's backstory and Rogue's backstory, so we really shouldn't have been surprised when Magneto didn't want Logan. Also, let us reminisce for a second back to a time when only a select few in the theater understood why Jean's hair was red and why she was wearing that bright red blazer.
A girl in Illinois who can walk through walls.
She also has some time travel projection powers, but we'll get to that later. Oh, and also she gets slightly more famous and then way more famous. Probably shouldn't wear a cape to a Senate hearing, so a long flowy coat will do, even if I stick to my assertion that senators should be wearing capes. I see obsession with putting X's in these movies began early. Or I guess they picked a catwalk with them in the background.
Whatever are you looking for? I'm looking for hope.
I will bring you hope, old friend.
Eric and Charles, amigos, besties, some might say boyfriends? Whatever the case, 2 people who were close that just had different fundamental opinions while still clearly having a deep affection for one another. Fun fact, this friendly truck driver is the voice of Beast from the 90s cartoon.
This is Laughlin City.
Whatever you do, don't hit him in the balls.
Survival advice that someone should have told Mystique. The blink of adamantium-coated bones. Oh man, Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. That glower, the way he's continually flexing every muscle in his body, it's like he forces adrenaline into his blood at will.
Wolverine!
Another fun fact, if you ever noticed that Logan looks a little more toned in this scene versus later shirtless scenes, that's because it was a reshoot at the end of principal photography. So he had a lot more time to work out, which, you know, Hugh Jackman's workout routine.
The mutant phenomenon.
Ha, these little glances. Each a mutant, neither knowing for sure about the other. Still one of the best reveals of any superpower mutation, whatever badassness you want to call it, ever. Also gun control.
Get out.
You don't know or you don't care.
Pick one.
It would probably be just about impossible to convince a single person sitting in the theater watching this movie right now that Hugh Jackman is actually the sweetest man alive. In fact, it's been reported that he used to take an ice-cold shower at 5 a.m. before filming every day to get into Logan's irritated headspace. No one ever questioned the heart of gold, though.
Does it hurt?
Every time.
Hugh Jackman, ladies and gentlemen. An Aussie import I think a lot of us just assumed was American for far too long.
You know, you should wear your seatbelt.
Clairvoyance. Here I thought Rogue was just Mrs. Stelia Powers mutant. Still, to this day, one of the best, possibly my favorite visual effects ever. 19 years old and still so seamless. Smells like my brother. Oh, nope, guess not. Ah, Cyclops, the first X-Man, and Storm, the first one we see use powers in the animated series. Well, except for Sabretooth, I guess, but we saw him too. Let's all just consider that had Cyclops just let Logan die, he would probably still be alive. I haven't connected all the dots yet, but I think I can get there. Wait, no, Logan would have survived anyway. I'll work something out. Cradleless, stringless, Newton's cradle. Perhaps like an exercise for his powers? Use it or lose it, as they say. Further easing us into Magneto's more ostentatious costume with his helmet and that black and crimson button-down. What an iconic scene with Logan as our stand-in, running around the corridors, running into the suits, hearing Xavier telepathizing in his head, the camera work, the bare feet, the chest hair.
What's a Magneto?
How do magnets work anyway?
What do they call you? Wheels?
Written by Hugh himself.
Anonymity is a mutant's first defense against the world's hostility.
Unless we're playing basketball, then it's teleporting. Jubilee's first cameo, but oh goodness will it not be her last cameo. Give Jubilee a character.
The children have affectionately called X-Men.
Yeah, that's better than Moira coming up with it.
When I was 17, I met a young man named Eric Lensher. He became Magneto.
So not everything lines up with the First Class trilogy, obviously. But entering into an already established world works for this movie about characters with substantial backstories and origins. Just in case the lynching metaphor wasn't 100% clear.
You know, people like you are the reason I was afraid to go to school as a child.
Ah, Mystique. All our collective jaws dropped because Why in the world is she naked? Mystique was never naked in the comics. Well, think about that. In the movies, the most significant role she plays is infiltrating by shapeshifting. So if she had to constantly change clothes as well, still there's no reason for her to change back other than for the audience. Well, unless you take J-Law's mutant proud history to heart. Also, fun fact, Rebecca really kicked Bruce Davidson in the face.
He could very well be older than you, Professor.
Depends how you feel about Origins Wolverine.
Not entirely sure it's him Magneto wants.
I have to love that even though Xavier can't read his mind, he still suspects the truth. And Mystique was, let's say, simplified for at least this first movie, but her character is internally consistent, and there are hints at something more profound. Really, I just love the way she hangs off of Magneto.
Well, don't fear God, Senator, and certainly don't fear me. Not anymore.
Ian McKellen is always a win. It's amazing what he and Patrick Stewart can do to elevate a movie.
Like your professor.
Nowhere near that powerful.
It's funny because it's not true. This is why you don't root around people's repressed memories. Someone always gets stabbed. Also, crap, that's brutal for our first entry in a new comic book world where Logan is supposed to be the guy we connect with. He just stabbed her. And you might be thinking, Logan, you pulled your claws out and now she's gonna bleed out. Don't you know anything? But I imagine it was just an impulse. Plus, if he left them in, people would be upset because it would be like he's still stabbing her. Plus PG-13, you know? Even her knowledge of his healing factor was set up during the crash. And I already won that scene because it's fantastic. It was just also visual storytelling. Seriously, the visual effects in this film are so impressive. I'm not pretending like Jurassic Park didn't exist, just that a couple years later we got these claws. But it's also the concept behind this of a prison cell that only Magneto can access or allow access to. Well, unless you're Jellyfish Man. There it is, his film debut. Stanley the Manly.
Because he helped me build it.
From a certain point of view, he was present for construction. Love that zoom out effect, expanding the room and lengthening the walkway. Happy Logan.
The first boy I ever kissed ended up in a coma for 3 weeks. I can still feel him inside my head, and it's the same with you.
Besides the obvious reasons, I mean, he's Hugh freaking Jackman, it makes sense that Rogue would start to have feelings for Logan. The only other person's head she's been in was her boyfriend, so that could make your wires feel crossed. Also this.
I'll take care of you.
Who wouldn't smile seeing Cyclops in real life? Not this kid, I mean this kid. The extra couldn't stop staring and smiling, so they used it. Never noticed the steel heels Magneto wears. Always assumed they were there, but there they are.
Remarkable metal doesn't run through your entire body, does it?
This feels like a nod to Fatal Attractions. Not this one, this one. This could have gone down differently, at least at some point, and if it was rated R. Yep. And part of the reason the visual effects work is because when they could, it was practical. Real cars being picked up by cranes and dropped. Real train car being ripped open. Like a game of chess, Magneto always puts the onus on Xavier to act.
I don't think I can stop them all. Still unwilling to make sacrifices.
That's like a callback to a movie that didn't come out for another decade.
I'm afraid of them.
I think you've got one less person to be afraid of.
I'm glad he got a chance to come around before his gooey end. The old in-camera switcheroo using twins. Finally found our serial crusher.
Are you going to kill me?
Yes.
That's some real honesty.
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Yes he would. And while we're at it, I can't believe it's almost guaranteed now that we'll never get to see Hugh in that suit. That's a sick disguise even if it's probably a little outside her wheelhouse.
I don't know. Keep your eye open.
Ha. Not the last time he'll have to fight another prettier Logan. Oof, that's brutal when you realize that her claws had to be part of her. I'm just remembering that Toad is Ray Park. You know who he is. Snake Eyes, Weapon X, Darth Maul, that one bad guy in Doctor Strange. Yep. Hardcore yep. Another thing that was established in the crash scene was Cyclops' ability to control the intensity of his beam through his visor. Blows up a tree, cuts a sequel. Badass good girl.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?
What cheesy but chuckle-worthy punchline will Storm use for that setup? Is it 1. Deep-fried frog legs? 2. They become Throg? 3. They earn cameos in future Star Wars movies? Vote in the thingamajig in the upper right corner of the screen.
Same thing that happens to everything else.
I actually recently learned that Joss Whedon wrote that line as a throwaway, but it made it in anyway.
Prove it. You're a dick.
Sincerity.
You sure you saw what you saw?
Oh, Magneto, always teetering on the line of pure villainy. He's not really planning to kill all the humans. Storm could be lying to him. You had one job, Extra. One job! That's brutal and also ingenuity and also some form of self-sacrifice. It's all good. Badass good guy. Such a ridiculous over-the-top yup. It feels like they couldn't really decide if Sabretooth has a healing factor, kind of like it was unclear if he did in the early comics. Probably a good idea to leave it open-ended. Maybe Logan just missed all his vitals.
You owe me a scream.
Well, that's not fair. You were choking her last time, so how could she scream?
Scream for me. Hey, Bub.
Nah, they got one bub in there.
Jean,
Scott, when I tell you, open your eyes.
you dropped something.
Now.
Teamwork.
Cyclops, can you hit it?
One more payoff of a setup early that maybe only your brain noticed. Logan laughs at all the different X-Men names when he's introduced to them, even adds his own.
Wheels?
It's a way to have your cake and eat it too. Names are correct, but he says what the audience is thinking. They're silly. But over time, he's gotten used to them, just like we have. More teamwork. It's almost like there's some kind of team. And a little more sacrifice from Logan. Generosity, even. Also, that's pretty brutal.
Let's get him out of here.
Ooh, who was that? Did that voice sound familiar? We'll come back to him.
It'll work.
She's fine. She took on a few of your more charming personality traits for a while.
Give me that movie.
There's an abandoned military compound at Alkali Lake.
Man, setting up the future and then paying it off.
I'll be back for this.
When you're older, and it's a little less weird. And maybe when you're through the vampire phase.
I will always be there. Old friend.
What a comic book movie. I mean, like Saturday morning sugary cereal on the couch X-Men story. Oh, so good. Even the way Charles beats Eric is an illustration of the way the two men think. Eric expects Charles to use his stronger pieces like he would and is beaten by a pawn assault. Also, coolest prison ever? Oh, did I forget to mention? Did you not know that Solid Snake wrote this screenplay? Well, that must be worth 10 wins.
This one's alive. Let's get him out of here.
I can't believe this Friday is the last time we get a Fox X-Men movie for the foreseeable future. That's why I want to do the first X-Men rather than the more appropriate Last Stand, which I'll get to later. There's some good stuff in there. Coming back to this movie almost 2 decades later, my first gut reaction was that the comparison to Jewish prisoners in Nazi-occupied Poland and mutants in the not-too-distant future New York was irksome. I mean, you're comparing a completely harmless race of non-superpowered people who were villainized by evil people with a group that contains Magneto, who is literally a villain and does and says bad things.
We are the future, Charles, not them. They no longer matter.
Senator Kelly is basically painted as a bigot, but like, even the good guy takes control of two dudes' minds later? And even without my point that I'm getting to, I promise. I understand both sides of why it was done this way. Kelly has to be the bad guy because building Magneto as the anti-villain / Professor Xavier's friend is far more interesting. And also, even if they're right, guys like Kelly do exist. You can be correct, your fear's legitimate, and still be a racist, or speciesist. And the other side of giving us insight into why Eric would be so wary of anyone attempting to introduce laws about a specific group of people. And it even excuses some of the decisions he makes along the way.
I feel a great swell of pity for the poor soul who comes to that school.
Both Eric and Charles care for mutant kind. That's why these characters are so enthralling to watch. But the thing that I came to realize is that in the Marvel Universe, while not explicitly stated in these movies, there are non-mutant superpowered people who are not treated the same way. The Sokovia Accords were a response to an event. At the beginning of this movie, mutants are just existing. So it's still a stretch for me, but the message is more important. Since this is the first X-Men movie, fun little anecdote that will tie back into what I'm talking about. Man, we are all over the place today. When Stan Lee wanted to add to his roster of superheroes, he was feeling like the origins were getting stale, and so according to him, he took the easy way out and just made the mutants. Nothing lazy about you, Stan. And the fact that his decision to create heroes who were just born that way opened up so many new types of stories and conflicts, and then they actually told those stories, it's something special.
I'm afraid of them.
The X-Men are a voice for so many marginalized people, and yet we're still accessible by everyone. That's the more important message. Marginalized groups look different around the world, and the X-Men can be a stand-in for any and all of them. It's not the most exact representation of the comics or the cartoon that a lot of us who were really excited for this movie grew up watching. Jubilee and Rogue were sort of blended together, Jean took over some of Beast's responsibilities, and really, except for Magneto, the characterization of all the bad guys was reduced to strange looking. It's actually interesting. Sabretooth, Mystique, and Toad are all very unhuman looking, while all of the X-Men look totally normal. Also, Rogue was nerfed because Fox knew they could never explain why she had the powers of a character they didn't own the rights to. But every decision was made in service of the story. Rogue's power is like the pinnacle of isolation and separation from the normal world. Swapping her for Jubilee Is the Runaway allowed us to connect with mutants a lot quicker. And there are some fan service cameos in appearance and kind of name. Kelly isn't entirely different from his comic counterpart, but they sort of rushed through his story to get his name in there. We already talked about Mystique, who is well, she's there. With, well, there's, let's see, there's this, and then also, right, one line. And also, she's no longer Rogue's mom. But for the first movie in a series with an undetermined audience, letting Magneto be the only one with motivations was probably the right play. And the conflict is still relevant today. Our two leaders have been compared to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. with how they approach the plight of their marginalized people.
I intend to fight it. By any means necessary.
That's why this movie still holds up. Sadly, not everything can stay golden, but I'm happy with my workaround. Next week, no everything great about video, but I'm hoping to be able to fulfill one of my patrons' requests for a 60-second review on this off week, and then back to your regularly scheduled programming the week after.
Superhero landing. You're gonna do a superhero landing. Wait for it!
Sorry? You call that a landing?
Superhero landing! Yeah, that's really hard on your knees.